Yeah, welcome to the third video on Aristotle's account of change. In the last video, we got an account of accidental beings and how to analyze them into their accidental designation and their accidental property and the substance that underlies them. In this video, we'll put that analysis to use in giving an account of change. So the idea is in any change, they're opposites. So you can think of the cold and the hot, and on a traditional way of thinking, traditional Greek way of thinking, the opposites change into others, and we see this in many different ancients. So we saw this in example in the Phaedo, right? So A comes to be B, hot comes to be cold, and here the cold isn't coming out of nothing, the hot isn't coming out of nothing, rather the hot is coming from the cold and the cold is coming from the hot. And so this fits the picture of A comes to be B, right? But notice when B comes to be out of A and B are usually opposites, but not necessarily polar opposites, just different possibilities in a range. So, 70 degrees can become 71 degrees, can become 72 degrees, and so on, right? So the way that things are opposites, can be degrees in a range. And the idea is that in any change, there's going to be three pieces to the change. For example, if you've got an opposite, the hot, if that's present in an underlying thing, then that opposite can't be a principle unless the underlying thing is the principle too. So we can't have heat unless there's something that's hot, right? So we can't have the hot unless there is something that is hot, say the brick. I'll just put a B, brick. And so the idea is we can't have the hot unless we have the brick, and we can't have the cold unless we have the brick, or something that's doing the work of the brick. And it's the brick that's going to provide for the continuity in the change, right? So remember, in any change, there was novelty and continuity. And the underlying thing, the substance, is going to provide for the continuity, but its accidents are going to change. And so the way that Aristotle is gonna treat this is gonna say, look, take these statements, A comes to be B, the red comes to be green, the hot comes to be cold, the St. Louisian comes to be a Carolinian, or the Pittsburgher comes to be a Carolinian. Really what's going on in these is it's not a statement of the form A comes to be B, but there's always going to be an implicit C, where the C indicates the substance, right? The C indicates the substance. So when we've got the Pittsburgher person comes to be a Carolinian person, right, that makes explicit what the substance is, what the C is, right? So when the Pittsburgher comes to be a Carolinian, when you get that statement, the way you need to analyze it is into the Pittsburgher person comes to be the Carolinian person. And so all changes are really of compound things, right? They're really changes of compound things like this, though they can be viewed simply, though grammatically they can look like they're simple changes. So things changed from and into can always be analyzed into the underlying thing and what's changed. A Pittsburgher can become a Carolinian because we're focusing on the thing that changes, but there's also the underlying thing, the person. And so how do you account for change? Well, it's going to be through the change of the accident, right? From Pittsburgh, from Carolina. And the underlying thing is the person. So that's the account of change in a nutshell. But there are going to be other kinds of statements of change. So we've looked at statements like the Pittsburgher comes to be a Carolinian, and you could add to this, the red thing becomes a green thing, etc., right? But there's also going to be statements like the musician becomes a St. Louisan. How would Aristotle analyze this kind of statement? I'm going to want to talk about this in class next time we meet. So think about this. How would Aristotle explain a statement of change that's like this? A musician becomes a St. Louisan. What would he say is going on here? And think back to the analysis of compound beings that we talked about last time. In the next video, I want to turn to that second kind of change. So now we've analyzed statements of the form A comes to be B, but what about A comes to B? What about Sally? Right? What about that kind of statement? That's what I'm going to want to turn to next.